We will finish reading chapter 7 for How to Eat Fried Worms. After we're done with chapter 7, you'll be asked to do a Google form with a question that we'd been thinking about while reading, and we'll go over that before you go off to work on it. So the question that we're thinking about is, describe what Joe said would happen when Billy ate the peppered worm. Remembering back to it being in chapter 5. So let's read chapter 7, and then tomorrow you will be using chapters 5 through 7 to write your summary. So chapter 7. After the movies, Tom walked home with Billy. Tomorrow I'll roll the crawler in cornmeal and fry it like a trout. It's not really the taste, said Billy. It's more the thought. When I start to eat it, even though it's smothered in ketchup and mustard and grated cheese, I can't stop thinking, worm, 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 worm. Gaggles of worms in bait boxes, worms drying up on sidewalks. A worm squirming at the fish hook gores into him. The soggy end of a worm draggling out of a dead fish's mouth. Ribbons yanking worms out of a lawn. I can't stop thinking worm. Yeah, but if I fry it in cornmeal, it won't look like a crawler, said Tom. I'll put parsley around it and some slices of lemon. And then you can concentrate. Think fish. All the time we're waiting in the barn, all the time you're eating, keep saying to yourself, fish, 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 fish. Here I am eating fish, good fish. Trout, salmon, flounder, perch. I'll ride my mini bike into church. Dance, tuna, haddock, trout. What'll you hear the minister shout? Fish, 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 fish. Shark, haddock, sucker, eel. I'll race my father in his automobile. Eel, flounder, bluegill, shark. We'll race all day till after dark. Billy cheered up. Think how they'll all stare. I'd drive up the aisle, zip around the front pew, down a side aisle under the stained glass windows. My parents would kill me. Reverend Yonder peered down over the Bible stand. William, he'd cry. William, you take that engine thing out of here this minute. Yeah, and then they'd come chasing out after us, said Tom. Billy laughed, waving his arms and yelling, and we'd lean them zigzag round and round, in and out, around the gravestones and monuments in the cemetery, and then roar off down the sand gate road, leaving them draped over tombs, panting and shaking their fist, dancing around and boxing the air. And that Monday we'd smuggle into class disguised as Raymond Dwelly because he hid it in the coat closet. And then when Millie Butler said anything at all, even something like, excuse me, or if she ever sniffed, we'd put a whole bottle of ink over her head and run for the coat closet, overturning chairs and desks behind us to slow up Mrs. Howard. She'd come after us, fuming and shouting threats, and suddenly the door of the coat closet would slam open, and out we'd roar on our mini bike in blood-red crash helmets and white jumpsuits, over scarves screaming out behind us. And we'd roar round and round the classroom while Mrs. Howard knelt among the overturned desks and chairs, sobbing helplessly into her hands, and then rum out the door and up the hall, thumbing our noses and the monitors. Brackety, brackety up the stairs, sniff arming tacklers into Mr. Simmons' office, up onto his desk, broom. A backfire into his face and a zoom out the window as he topples backward in his chair in a hurricane of quiz papers and report cards, and then crunch. Landing on the drive, we would roar off down the highway to Bennington and join the Navy so Mrs. Howard and Mr. Simmons and our parents can't punish us. So during this part of the chapter, Billy's talking about how bad it is to eat the worm and Tom is trying to convince him to think fish, and he thinks about if he had his mini bike, what he would do with it, and how really that wouldn't be true because he couldn't even be seen by Mrs. Howard or Mr. Simmons or his parents because of those type of actions. He would be punished. Okay, let's look back at our question. The question was, describe what Joe said would happen when Billy ate the peppered worm? Well, if we go back into the text, into chapter 5, we can see that he says he'd eat one piece and then another, and then all of a sudden he'd sneeze. And then he would have a faint look of panic would creep over his face. He'd clutch his stomach, which means he'd hold his stomach, and he'd keep sneezing. He keeps saying he'd be sneezing, he'd be sneezing. So, if we go back to our question, describe what Joe said would happen when Billy ate the peppered worm. Well, when Joe said that when Billy would eat the peppered worm, he would start sneezing, and he'd sneeze so much that he couldn't stop. And it says that he would even hold his stomach from sneezing so much. It would be making him actually like have a stomach ache from sneezing so much. And he described that that would be why Joe would stop the contest, because he wouldn't be able to handle all of his sneezing that he would have. So go ahead into the Google form and complete the question that we have for today. If you have any questions, see your homeroom teacher.